Welcome
Perfect.
to Innovating with Scott Amyx. I'm your host, Scott, and today I'm joined by Matt Martin, CEO of Clockwise. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Matt, you talk a lot about employee productivity and how most of us are stuck in hours of meetings that we really can't control. How is Clockwise looking at individual employee schedules through the lens of the entire team and moving those meetings around to maximize the focus time and giving people back maybe 2 hours of uninterrupted time per day?
Yeah, great question, Scott. And it's hitting on a multitude of layers of what we're working at Clockwise. And so at a very high level, what Clockwise is doing is we are an intelligent calendar system that frees up time so that you can work on what matters. And as you identify, it's basically based off that feeling that I'm sure you're familiar with and so many of your listeners are familiar with, which is you look at your calendar in the morning and you think, ugh, how am I going to get anything done today? I have back-to-back meetings. My day is all fragmented. You might have 30-minute blocks to triage some emails, but where's that time to go heads down and really proactively get some work done? And so what Clockwise does is we connect to your calendar system. So you can OAuth with Google Calendar. And we use AI and ML to scan your calendar to understand your priorities. Things like the simple things like what time zone you're in, all the way down to very complex things like when do you prefer to work, when are your meetings placed, what location are you in, what meeting rooms do you use. And we use all this rich information along with the information about your colleagues to understand what would be an optimal schedule to open up those large blocks of time. And so what this ends up looking like is a user joins Clockwise, they select in the meetings that they want to put under Clockwise's management, and then Clockwise will automatically move those meetings to better times, open up your afternoon to get that meaty, productive time. We call it focus time, where you can go heads down for 2+ hours and knock out some work.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So in the setup, are the users specifying kind of the key couple of blocks within a schedule that they want to be able to actually protect and preserve? Or is the system learning over time? Because ultimately in a company meeting kind of an environment, systems are always looking for availability and it's looking for that kind of available bandwidth all the way across. And you're kind of sitting into that, but is a user actually explicitly stating when they feel like they're going to be most productive?
The user, so there are 2 layers to that. We always like to infer, and so the system does get smarter and it learns from your usage and your calendar. But then we also like to ask. So the user can choose to affirmatively state, I prefer to have that heads down time in the afternoon. And then the system will look across everybody in the company and the meetings they attend to try to optimize for everybody's preferences at once. Now, sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not possible, but Clockwise is always in the background trying to protect your time and trying to open up the time according to your preferences and make your schedule better so you can do your best work.
So I think the audience are really interested at this point because it's something that hits them on a personal level on a daily basis. It's hard enough, especially in a multinational organization that has branches and employees across the world in different time zones, to even try to align a meeting across those zones, let alone add this additional layer. So what are some of the complexities, and then how are you in the user kind of testing understand exactly what are kind of the limitations to not irk some of these people that are involved in the mass rescheduling? Yeah,
so I'd love to dive into some of these areas because I think they're fascinating. At a high level, just to touch on it, some of the things that Clockwise does, the core is this meeting rescheduling so that it opens up focus time. But we also do touch on complex scheduling systems. So when you're trying to find that golden hour across time zones in a multinational company, we can schedule with Clockwise and do that automatically, find the best time for you. We also allow you to connect your personal calendar to get automatic travel time put on your calendar. And all this relates to kind of the base level, Scott, which is we believe that an attribute of successful people is having their true obligations on their calendar. So one of the things that we're helping users do is automatically get that time onto their calendar so their real priorities are reflected. And this helps in complex scheduling situations because everybody then, even if they're not a Clockwise user, can see when they're trying to schedule, Scott is traveling from location to location and can't make it. So kind of the first layer of defense is automatically helping to put those things on the calendar without the user having to do anything. Now, the second layer is exactly what you're speaking about, which is some of the complexities of how the system thinks about those situations where it's trying to move a meeting into a better slot. And the first action that the system takes is to evaluate and score every single block on your calendar. So we're looking across every last 15-minute block, whether it's scheduled or not, to see, is this an optimal time for Scott? And based on kind of that scoring function, we'll then look across to find an optimal time between all attendees. If we can find that optimal time, we'll scoop it right up. If we can't, and sometimes you can't, the system has to make a decision, which is this optimal enough for enough attendees and not detrimental enough to any single attendee to have confidence to move it into a slot? And so some of the things we look at there is how much better is it for you? Is it outside working hours for some of the attendees? How far outside of working hours? Is it something where it's in a slot where, yeah, sometimes you're willing to take an 8:30 where usually you'd like to take a 9 a.m.? We'll occasionally make those moves. And then finally, there are situations where you just literally, the system can't have confidence to move it. And the last thing we want to do is upset our users' intentions, to upset their schedule and to surprise them. So Clockwise really errs on the side of adding value, and the default state is still your calendar as it was originally scheduled.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes sense. Now, let me touch upon something perhaps maybe a little bit sensitive, is that you guys are working on kind of the manifestation, meaning that the meetings are set and you guys are trying to optimize that across different team members. But the real question is, and perhaps maybe there's others that's working on it, is should they even have those meetings in the first place? Mm-hmm. And if they did, what is the right format and approach that they should be having so that it is being run properly and optimally?
Yep. Great question. So I'm going to answer this, but I'm going to take a little bit of a roundabout approach, because what Clockwise is ultimately in the business of is behavior change. So we're creating an entirely new market. There are no competitors currently to optimizing and automatically moving your meetings in order to create a better schedule. So we are in the business of market creation and the business of changing behavior inside of organizations. In that environment, when you're trying to create a new market and you're trying to create a new behavior of how to work, I think it's best, and it's been our approach, to start with where we can add value automatically. So by creating a system that's frictionless to adopt, that you can get set up with in 2 minutes, we kind of nudge the user into thinking about focus time, to thinking about some attributes of how they're working that they weren't previously familiar with, and getting used to the system. That's the stage that we're in currently. Now, our aspiration is to get deeper into what I would call proactive workflows around better meeting management, better agendas, and actually selectively deciding whether or not this meeting has to happen. We're not there yet, to be honest, but you can imagine how having a fundamental understanding of the calendar, the content of the calendar, enables you to empower your users to understand, is this a meeting that we really need 5 people at, or could this just be done by 2? I am very excited to get to that stage, but it does require the user to actively take some actions, to go in, to make some decisions, to add an agenda, to really own the workflow in a way that our current system just provides a lot of value automatically.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about the workflow. And at some point, either systematically or the user explicitly has to state that the meeting that they attended was in fact on a scale of 1 to 10, valuable, not valuable, actionable. Yeah. Without that information, it's difficult to determine kind of the weight and value of those meetings for future subsequent scheduling.
Yeah, this is a fascinating one. So there was a company a while ago, and I apologize, I'm blanking on the name of it. Esper, I believe it was called Esper, that was doing precisely this. So they were adding the ability to rate the meetings, and then give kind of anonymous feedback to the meeting organizer. And I talked to the CEO and founder there, and you can imagine kind of the social dynamics of that are really tough to get over initially. People are, sensitive to the fact that they are creating a meeting that people are rating very poorly. And it was actually a very big product challenge for them, because while the ultimate result of understanding which meetings are valuable is a very good thing for the business to know about and the organizers to know about, people were reticent to adopt it because of being worried about this rating. And it's a feature request we get quite often. I think we're well poised to be able to put that in place, because exactly to your point, that's very valuable information. But I think the contrast between Esper and Clockwise is a contrast in approach, which is once you're acclimated to the system, you see that Clockwise is giving you value, you see that it's working on your behalf, we've gained your trust, then we can make those asks that are maybe a little bit socially uncomfortable at first.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. Makes a tremendous amount of sense. Now, as you look to your product milestone and product development, you started to kind of touch upon it, but let's talk about kind of this year. What are some of the key things that you're looking to release that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So as always with forward-looking statements, some of this is subject to change, but a few things that we're incredibly excited about and we're working on right now is directly born out from the learnings of our users over the last 6 months. So over the last 6 months, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth. We've over 10x increased our user base. We've moved over 200,000 meetings. We've scheduled over 100,000 hours of focus time for our users, driving real value back to large companies like Lyft, Asana, Strava, Twitter. And what we've seen is that what's really important is, of course, that initial viral adoption that we love to see on the back of individual usage. But after that first round of viral adoption inside the company, you start to see the usage kind of coalesce into teams. And this is very natural, right? You tend to meet with the same set of people on a recurring basis. And our real power users are taking advantage of that inside the current application. And we're trying to, this year, make it easier for them to do so. So adding an intentional team layer where teams and team leaders can understand what's blocking us. What meetings are getting in the way? To your point, Scott, what are some meetings that perhaps we don't need? Are we seeing a spike in interviews? Are we seeing a spike in one-on-ones? Who's out of office at what time? How do I need to plan ahead in order to, based on our capacity? And really wrapping that up in a way where the team can collaborate on how they're utilizing their time. So that's initiative number one. And a second initiative is a little bit of a move later this year into the enterprise space as well. So we're in these large companies, we're seeing a lot of mass adoption, and we want to unlock the ability of large organizations to roll it out on an enterprise basis.
Terrific. Well, I want to wish you the best of luck. My last question for you is if you could share your greatest product innovation failure and the lessons learned.
Yeah. So as a listener of your program, I knew that this question was coming. So I had a little bit of time to think about it because I think it's a great question. And I think our biggest failure, I'll actually own on a personal level. So Clockwise is currently delivered in a Chrome extension. It's a great frictionless way to surface Clockwise's intelligence and power right side by side with Google Calendar. But as a product leader and somebody who loves to build product, the Chrome extension initially felt very constrained to me. It's very restricting, and it to me personally, it undersells the largeness and the impact of our platform because so much happens behind the scene. And so my impulse at the start of the company was to build a very robust web interface to Clockwise. And we spent some time doing this, but the realization is, again, in this mode of where you're pushing behavior change, where you're bringing the user a new mode of working, you really have to reduce the friction as much as possible. And it took me too long to accept the reality that the benefit of the frictionless adoption of the Chrome extension was really a much better approach than focusing on the web application first. We'll come back to that. We will grow that UI. We'll make a larger application. But the Chrome extension has proven to be a fantastic way to get that early adoption.
Well, I love your focus on reducing friction and increasing adoption. So with that, I've been joined by Matt Martin, who is the CEO of Clockwise. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Scott.